Ask about that, and Premier Wynne, I'm really interested in your view. I mean, yesterday afternoon you met with representatives of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, and I understand that's going to be part of the process going forward. How is that going to change, in your view, the whole kind of dynamic and the outcome of our thinking and decision-making around climate change?
Well, I think it will ground it in the realities of people who are living in communities that, to the issue of the North, who are very close to what climate change is doing to the environment, first of all. But I think more broadly, you know, we have a responsibility, we have a collective responsibility to make sure that we engage with First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people because they have knowledge and they have perspectives that are going to help us to move in the best way possible. And I think it's going to make the process better. And it's why you'll see in the declaration at every juncture we've made it clear that those voices have to be part of the discussion and part of the solution. And as I say, I think it will make the process better, it will make the solutions better, and you know, we can learn from each other as we go along.
Maybe if you allow me,
certainly,
Alan, I could give a very practical example of that. I was just told today of a project in Nunavik where one coastal community of Inuits is going to have a hydroelectric project replacing the diesel generator that will provide heat, light, even greenhouse in the community. And we know how expensive food is up there. Mm-hmm. And the best part of this is that the Inuits are going to be 50% partner of that project. So they're actually making it happen themselves. And that's another important message that we're sending today. These type of deals, these type of partnerships, we need to see them all around. I know that Greg has done a lot of work in sharing the returns of hydroelectric projects with First Nations. This is the only way we're going to be able to develop such projects.
Tell us a little bit more about that, Premier.
Yeah.
Well, there used to be a tradition in Manitoba of flood, mitigate, and compensate, which dragged it out into very negative relationships for decades. So we reversed that. We do all the planning. And this was actually before the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People came in, which recommends free, prior, and informed consent. We worked out a planning model where the project would only go ahead after a vote of the community supported it. But those decisions really sometimes took 7, 8, 9 years. We did all the land use planning. We identified any environmental risks, and they had to be addressed. We looked at issues of culture, language, actually strengthening some of the natural species in the area, their ability to be there and survive there. We've signed agreements that in some cases will last for 70 years. And once everybody's at a place where they're comfortable with it, we take it to a vote. And when the vote occurs, then there's a whole bunch of other issues of how to make it work. So we actually share an equity stake, or it's now moving towards a guaranteed revenue stream coming out of the dam. That revenue stream accrues to the community. They're a partner in that. They get the benefits in terms of jobs, not all of them, but a significant amount of them. And then they have a long-term relationship with the Crown Corporation in our case. And for the first time ever, we've put a very significant representation of Indigenous people on the board of directors, which changes the dynamic quite dramatically as well. As the first Minister of Hydro, I had a lot of fun when I appointed them and watched the dynamic change.
So those models are the kinds of things that as we talk about what can the benefit be to people across the society, those are the kinds of things that the working groups can look at, and we can share that experience, which is why the conversation today was so important with all of the provinces and territories in the federal government at the table, because we will benefit from each other's experience in a very real way by engaging in this process.
I want to shift gears just a little bit. In the Prime Minister's remarks yesterday, he said that it is going to be fossil fuel that will finance the transition to a zero carbon future. Am I reading too much into this? That sounds like an increased financial burden on the oil and gas industry. Is this more bad news for Alberta?
Oh,
I wouldn't say so. I actually see it as the opposite. I think that, in fact, you can look at environmental progress and economic progress as companion pieces, not as conflicting pieces. And certainly I make this argument, and I've made the argument that in order to finance much of the transitions that we need to make, we need to ensure that, for instance, the fact that we continue to be a producer of non-renewable energy, that we're able to get, for instance, the right price for our product. So I suggested earlier today that leaving a third of the price on the table because we are still working on trying to find ways to get access to a more diverse market isn't helpful and is going to make it more challenging to finance some of the transition. Because, there's my view, certainly from the perspective of the province of Alberta, is that with the work that we've done and the cap that we put in emissions and the work that we're going to do around methane reduction, is what I'd like to see is that as we continue to produce non-renewable energy for export, which we will do for some time, that we're able to transition to being perceived correctly on the basis of facts, that we are a progressive energy producer and a responsible energy producer, and that markets around the world will see that about our product. And so it is a fundamental foundation of the prosperity that we enjoy in this country. And so we need to work with industry to make that transition to an improved standard of how we produce that product, and then at the same time use those resources to transition to more renewable energy as we go. And so it's not an either-or thing. And I see it as an opportunity to, even within the non-renewable sector, to diversify and to engage in the use of technology to significantly reduce the emissions that occur through and around the production and the export of non-renewable energy.
I want to come back to that, but first, Premier Couillard, you mentioned how important it was, the fact that you actually had a productive meeting today with the federal government, and that this has not been part of the political landscape. For almost my entire adult life, Quebec has always been very reluctant to participate in anything that looked like a national program in scope. I mean, no, but you are at the table now. I mean, are we entering a renewed period of cooperative federalism now?
Look, of course, it happens once in a while, and I hope it will not happen again, that we have separatist governments, separatist governments in Quebec, and if you had a separatist premier, probably this person would not be in the chair even. And of course, it changes realities. But look at what happened in the recent years. It's my predecessor, Jean Charest, who created the Council of Federation. He's the one who put people together on the European Free Trade Agreement on the road of this important agreement. And we were together, and we were an active partner in the Canadian Energy Strategy that was adopted by the Council of Federation. So of course, we are very, very wary of our jurisdictions. I'll be very, very transparent on this, and will always be. But we also want to be part of this country's success. And I think Quebec and what we brought in the country is an important part of what we all are here in this room. And I want to be assured that our contribution is maintained while protecting, of course, what we consider being our main interest in terms of jurisdictions and competencies. But to say that we have in Quebec sometimes practiced the empty chair policy, yes, but mainly when we had separatist governments in office, but certainly not now. Actually, I would say that my colleagues would probably recognize that we've been quite constructive and positive around the table.
Well, in fact, that was the next thing I wanted, because I wanted to ask Premier Wynne. I mean, the relationship that Quebec and Ontario has developed in the last couple of years is something the likes I've never seen, as long as I've been watching politics. Just expand on that, and the benefit that comes to both provinces.
I just want to reinforce what Premier Couillard has said, which is that, he is taking a leadership role if we're talking about this particular issue. But in terms of the partnership with Ontario, it's been very important. And, we have shared cabinet meetings. We're working on a number of issues, including electricity agreements. We are making sure that trade barriers that have existed between us are being removed. So that is good for the country, Alan. It's good for the country for Central Canada to be functioning and to be finding ways to work together. And it's good for the country for us then to bring that partnership into the discussion at the table with the rest of the provinces. So I look forward to a long relationship between Ontario and Quebec, and that, as I say, it helps in the federation. It helps the federation to develop a more collaborative stance across the country.
The other thing about this issue is that for the last couple decades, it's been dominated by economy versus environment, as if somehow there is a trade-off there, that if you have environmental protection, that invariably the economy will slow down. I'm interested in your view, Premier Sullinger, because you said that you weren't interested in any job-killing initiatives. I mean, have we got past that dichotomy that this is a zero-sum game, or is there still some convincing that has to be done that these are parallel paths, economic growth and environmental protection?
There's still some convincing to be done, but I think we've come a huge distance on that. I think we recognize that there's an opportunity in a rapidly changing global economy to be more innovative and to be more responsible in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and all the products and services we provide in a more sustainable way. And there's abundant opportunities to do that, whether it's in transportation, agriculture, building technologies, how we produce energy, how we store energy, renewables. All of those opportunities can create good green jobs for the future. And we're developing those training programs in our schools. We have sustainable education program in our schools that's well recognized by UNESCO. Young people are seeing it a different way based on the experiences they've had and the way they think about things. It's part of a larger theme in Canada around reconciliation, about how we work together to address these things. So I think these notions of reconciliation, human rights, climate change, and economy can't be separated anymore. I think they have to come together. And that, over time, that includes trade as well. There used to be trade separated from everything else.
Right.
All those factors have to start coming together. You really can't separate them because they don't actually separate on the ground. In people's lives, they all come together.
Does anyone else want to jump in that? I mean, I went to the exhibition down the hall, and you've got mining companies, you've got oil and gas companies, you've got technology companies. Have we reached a tipping point? Is something substantively different in 2016?
Alan, in Ontario, I mean, we really don't have a choice. If we're going to compete globally, if we're actually going to be able to have the diverse, strong economy that we know we're capable of, we've got to educate our people. I mean, our budget, the centerpiece of our budget was a change in terms of tuition and more access for low-income kids, because we've got to have everybody getting through school, getting the training that they need, and being able to take part. Mic just fell off. And that is taking part in the new economy. We're not going to be able to have traditional manufacturing in Ontario and be competitive, because we're just not going to be able to compete with other jurisdictions that can do those traditional things more cheaply. We've got to innovate. We've got to be ready for that 21st century competition. So I guess the point I'm making is I don't think we have a choice. I think that we have to grasp this. We're a tiny jurisdiction in terms of our population in the global context. And so if we're going to punch above our weight, these are the kinds of investments that we're going to have to make.
Rachel Notley, I was interested in, during your campaign, how you turned this argument basically on its head. Far from saying environmental regulation leads to slower economic growth, you said the absence of smart environmental regulation is really hurting the oil and gas industry. Expand on that theme, because it was unusual for a lot of people to hear.
Well, I mean, I think that the sort of the linkage and the positive linkage between economy and environment exists on at least two fronts. So the one that you mentioned, of course, is the fact that globally people are more concerned about carbon and climate change, and so a failure to act on it, a failure to acknowledge the issue, a failure to work as hard as you can to produce the cleanest energy that you can, is going to result in an inability to gain the social license to gain access to markets. So that's just the way things are. And you know, the last decade has been marked by by sort of a combination of sort of emphatic yelling and denial, and it hasn't, for instance, helped the energy industry in Alberta get an increased access to markets. So we're going to try a different approach. We're going to try to do our part to ensure that the product that we have is cleaner, is responsibly produced, is produced under a regime that people can have faith and trust in, and then work to build social license and markets in other jurisdictions.
Is the oil patch buying into that? Or are they still
I think a lot
of
are. No, I think it's a growing amount that really are, because the other piece of this, you know, people, and they always say, you know, never repeat your opposition's line, but just in this one case, you know, these accusations of job-killing carbon taxes, I really find that quite wrong, and I reject it out of hand. I mean, what we're talking about doing with our carbon levy is yes, we are incenting people through the collection of the levy to avoid carbon-producing behaviors, but in addition, what we're doing is we're creating a fund with which we can then incent renewable energy to bid into our grid. We can incent technological innovation and development. We can incent energy efficiency and energy efficiency investment and construction, and we can redirect the functioning of our economy to be more green, more innovative, more modern, more progressive. And so it actually builds the economy. It doesn't bring it down.
And then all the people in this room, all the people and the businesses in this room are going to work with us to make that happen, right? I mean, that's what this conversation has been about for 2 days. And so when I say in Ontario that my trade missions to India and China are about taking technology and know-how that we've developed in Ontario to those jurisdictions, this is what we're talking about. We have to do everything that we can here to develop technology to deal with our own issues, but we also have the capacity then to make connections in other parts. And I think Rachel is saying the same thing, to make connections and to be able to bring to the world the know-how that we've developed here.
Well, let me ask Premier Couillard to expand on that, because I mean the theme of this entire conference is, you know, the business of climate change and a zero carbon future. How big a role does technology play in the solution, and how is a national framework going to unleash clean tech and innovation?
Well, it's absolutely major. I mean, the way we're going to reach our targets is not only through carbon pricing. It's also through invention, and our genius to invent in Canada, which is well known and admired, but could be even more visible. And in this field, particularly in green tech and creating these new technologies of carbon capture and other wonderful things I've seen in the exhibit room, this is how we're going to create the jobs for the next generation and even this generation. But you were, Greg, Alan, talking about a tipping point. I'm struck now about the number of CEOs that come forward asking for clarity and predictability on carbon pricing.
Right, that's more important than the actual price.
And that tell us that they have in their drawers, as we heard today, that they have in their drawers financial statements with different levels of carbon prices, right, and they just want some clarity on this matter. And lastly, I was in Davos in January attending a meeting on the financial sector, now not only coming to grasp with the reality of climate change, but taking action under, of course, the leadership of Mark Carney, our previous governor of the Bank of Canada. And it was quite striking to hear these investors, both institutional and private, say that they are now assessing the climate risk of their investments. They're looking now at the carbon content of their investment portfolio and making decisions because of that. That's a true tipping point, and I think we should recognize that.
BC's 2008 carbon tax has been lauded around the world as a remarkably fair and effective way of dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, in no small way because it's revenue neutral. Every penny that is raised by the tax is put back into the economy, either the reduction of corporate or personal taxes. Premier Wynne, in your cap and trade system, you've chosen to go another route, to take the funds that come from cap and trade, estimated to be almost $2 billion in the first year, and put it in a green infrastructure fund. Explain why you didn't follow the path of BC and went this particular way.
Because we need the impetus to innovate. We need the investment in technology, the kind of innovation that we're just talking about, and that's what that revenue is going to do. And the fact that we are putting the cap on that is going to drive those emissions down, the only fair way of doing that is to reinvest in and support the innovation that will allow those caps to be met. So that's the direction we're going. And I think one of the things that's going to come out of this discussion today, over the next few months, is looking at what is the actual impact of the different regimes that are in place. What is the absolute reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that is actually happening as a result of the different systems that are in place. And I think that's going to be a challenging but a really good conversation.
Rachel, you chose kind of the same path, even though not called cap and trade, that you're going to establish a fund with the excess income that comes from. You want to add to that?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a merger of the two, because certainly our commitment, certainly, and particularly during the current time when our economy is struggling, is that every cent that is collected goes back into the economy, and that happens very quickly. It's not the idea that we're sort of slowly creating a big fund and pulling it out of the economy, because that would just be bad news the way things are going right now. So our plan is to reinvest very quickly through a number of different strategies, some rebates to low-income families, support for different sectors, energy efficiency, technological innovation. But the idea is very much to recycle it very quickly right back into the economy, because it's not about trying to sort of hunker away about a bunch of money for our bottom line.
But that's exactly the point. That's exactly what we're doing. Is putting that, and people will be able to see. I mean, it will be very transparent in terms of the amount of money that comes in and where it's being invested in order to do the things that we know that have to be done to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Manitoba going to follow the same course?
Yeah, I think different instruments are effective at different times. One that's completely returned in alternative tax reductions may not be the right instrument to do at a time when you need stimulus. And right now we need stimulus, direct job creation. When big business is sitting on their capital, when consumers or citizens are sitting on their money because they're concerned about the economy, you have to have direct stimulative investment in green technology, green infrastructure, and green jobs. So you have to take a look at the right instruments for the right conditions. Right now, we need to boost the economy in a sustainable green way.
I've been looking at public opinion.
You're here.
I've been looking at public opinion around this issue for a long time, and that people are genuinely concerned about the environment, but their reluctance to actually buy into the specific policies that a lot of political leadership are putting forward is because there's a perceived lack of fairness, that they somehow are going to have to be asked to sacrifice unduly while others, principally business, are going to get off scot-free. How do each of you convince your respective constituencies to come along with you, that there really is a benefit and not just sacrifice in what you're proposing and what you're doing with carbon pricing, with stimulative spending that raises deficits and all these other things? Premier Kiard, you first.
First, by telling people that climate change costs a lot of money already, and will cost even more in the future. That's the first message that has to be
sent. Doing nothing is more expensive.
It's more expensive. Yeah.
And then, this is where the debate between carbon tax, and by the way, the two are very good methods of putting a price on carbon. We should not make it a religious conflict between those who go with the carbon tax and those who go with the cap and trade system. The reason we decided to go that way is precisely what you just mentioned, is that I thought that we had to put the burden where it should be. 85% of our emitters are covered in the cap and trade system, so they have to make a very simple business decision. Am I going to pay these credits every year and remove them from my bottom line? Or am I going to invest in clean technology so I become eventually someone who sells credits to the market? That's a very simple business decision that CEOs have to do all the time on many other areas. That's why I like market mechanisms better. But again, carbon tax is a very good way of addressing the issue. The important is that people know the price and know how it's going to change, because one of the essential features of any carbon pricing system is that the price cannot stay the same. It has to go up as emissions go down. It's the same in our cap and trade system, and it should be also the same with a carbon tax. Otherwise, you see a plateau of the impact of whatever system you have in terms of emissions reduction.
Kathleen, when's your turn to pitch the Ontario voter?
Well, I think it starts from what you said earlier, Alan, about people's anxieties. You know, people know, people see what's happening. They see extreme weather events, they see flooding, they see drought. They are seeing, and that creates anxiety. So it's not that we then exploit that, but that's the reality. And so people want it, they want an answer. And so I think that explaining the costs, and you know, I talk about costs of insurance. I talk about the kinds of the quality of life issues that people will not be able to handle by themselves unless there's action taken. And then I think the system, whatever it is, has to be transparent. So when we talk about the revenue that's coming in terms of cap and trade, people need to know that those dollars are being invested in something that's going to help. And you're right about the fairness issue, and the fact is that companies do pay, and they will pay, and they will have to make decisions, as Philippe has said. But as a government, what we need to do is put the framework in place so that people can see what the benefit is of that revenue being accrued, and that it's not being saved, that it's not going into general revenue, but it's actually going in to solve the problem. So and we're in the middle of convincing. You know, we're in the middle of having that conversation in Ontario, and our opposition is very keen on undermining that argument and sort of narrowing the discussion down to this is just a tax on gasoline. Well, that misses the whole societal issue, and it actually, I think, underestimates people's understanding of what the future holds for their kids and their grandkids.
Well, Greg Sillinger, you're going into an election. I mean, is this an issue to be avoided, or is this something that you should be running on?
Well, it's an issue that we put out before the election so that we had a clear plan for the future of Manitoba, and people could compare that policy with the alternatives, which we haven't seen anything on yet. So we think that it was the right thing to do, and we think it also is something that's very important to folks that might want to vote for us. So we think it's important. I would say this, when it comes to climate change, it is important to show benefits right away, not just costs, not just additional burdens. That's why we put a big emphasis on green jobs. That's why we put an emphasis, we're bringing an environmental bill of rights. We just introduced it yesterday. Clean air, fresh water.
Where are those results most evident most quickly? I mean, because I think that's the other thing, is that, well, for example, I think many Canadians feel overwhelmed by this issue.
If you
We've been talking about it for decades.
If you can see your home heating bill go down as a result of a new technology that you can finance right on your hydroelectricity bill, and the first month after you install that new technology, your cost of heating your home and your electricity is cheaper, there's an immediate benefit. We have a finance tool called Pay As You Save, PAYS. We amortize the new technology over the life of it, and we ensure that the first month after you install it is less expensive than what you were doing before, with less greenhouse gas emissions and more jobs. There's ways to structure things that show immediate benefits in employment.
Yeah, Rachel Notley, your constituency is probably the most skeptical of these arguments, or can be, certainly elements of it. I mean, how do you convince, when you go into the Canadian Petroleum Producers Association board meeting, how do you convince people sitting around that table at this, that there's a great economic argument to be made, that there's lots of money to be made in a zero carbon future?
Well, honestly, I mean, I'd love to say that that I'm the most brilliant persuader on the planet, but I will say that, in fact, soon after I got elected, I realized that there was a large portion of that boardroom that you're talking about that didn't need to be convinced. They knew it already, and they were waiting for someone to show some leadership and set some consistent rules, and someone that would work with them collaboratively to come up with a plan that could both support innovation while setting out a reasonable path to progress and achievement. So, you know, so I think that working collaboratively with industry is part of it. But I also think, I mean, the bottom line, and we've talked already about how, you know, we've been struggling as a province to get our product to market, and it has not been helped by the international reputation that we have. And, you know, we had to back our efforts to change that reputation with real action. It wasn't enough to just say stuff. And I think that a lot of people in industry understood that and were on side. When it comes to the population as a whole, I'll admit it's a bit of a dicey time right now because we have a bit of more than a bit of a difficulty with our economy. But I actually believe that this will prove to be a tool of economic growth, economic diversification, economic transition that is positive for our province in this time. And so certainly that's the point that I'm going to make. And once again, to reinforce, this is not money coming out of the economy. This is money that's being shifted within the economy to support more innovation, more growth, more diversification.
The tyranny of time is upon us, so Philippe Criard, Kathleen Wynne, Greg Sellinger, Rachel Notley, on behalf of everyone in the room, I want to thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Just before you run out, a couple of things. First, I'd really like to say, as our premiers leave, one, I think we have to be very proud to be Canadians, to have leaders like that who can come up. Second thing, this is what Globe is about, collaboration and leadership, and I think as Premier Wynne said, we're all going to be there to help support them, right, as we transition to a new future. So thank you, everybody. There's a movie night tonight. If people want to go, free popcorn in room 11, and there's going to be a bunch of videos played on the Pacific Ocean, Indigenous, environmental and economic opportunities, lots of good stuff, 3 producers there, and of course there's all kinds of receptions, so enjoy yourselves tonight. Don't drink too much, you got a half a day left, so have fun. Thanks.